I think the industry had to change because it was wrong that you were contracted to a football club, and at the end of your contract, the club still had a hold on your services. It's like you working for a Spanish television network, and on a 3-year contract, at the end of your 3-year contract, you want to go to an Italian network, and they say, sorry, you can't unless the Italian network pays us money. So that was an obvious problem. And I think Bosman challenged it, he won. I know Jean-Marc ran into issues later in his life, but I found him a charming, very determined young man, backed with a great lawyer and a great cause. And so I was very supportive. I think the industry was very supportive. The interesting thing was, the industry never really saw it coming. And then, of course, politics comes into it, as it always does. And we had the advent of the European Union getting involved. And the then competitions minister, Mario Monti, who then became quasi-Prime Minister of Italy, I think, later on, decided, and I'm a bit cynical here, but decided to make a bit of a name for himself by saying, but if this is happening, if we're converging footballers' rights with the Treaty of Rome, which I agree with, then there has to be some restriction of movement which is commensurate to the industry as was to respect the footballing industry. And we carved out, or they carved out, trading windows, which is fun on the last day of the window, twice a year, and it's entertainment, and you watch your television, and it's exciting, and you hear, and you listen to the radio all day, and we are in the entertainment business, so I don't have a problem with that, but I don't think it helps football, because it plays to the powers that exist. So the Real Madrids, the AC Milans, the Manchester United, we were the deal that changed part of that when we brought Arshavin over to England, and we had 4 seconds left on the clock. And the problem was that in those days you had to have some sort of paper exchange. Now there's a European exchange where you lock in and you lock out, and everybody, if the 2 paperworks match, then it's okay. But this is only 2009, so it's only 6-7 years ago. They had to have paper, so you have to have the fax machines talk to each other, and the Russian fax machine didn't work that day. So we had to do it by one word. The word agreed came out of Russia on an email, and the authorities obviously could see the back paperwork was intended, so they let it through. But what happens in the summer trading window in particular, because January tends to be a bit of a tidy up, but in the summer they start structuring their deals, some now, some March, April, May. End of season comes, new season begins. It's now midway through August, only 2 weeks left, and that right back that you thought was wonderful last year is actually pretty rubbish this year. So they're all sitting going, oh my God, we've got to do something. We've got to find another right back. And that right back that they may have wanted is now the subject of 2 or 3 other interests, because he's obviously good if somebody wants him. So they go to level 2 or level 3, and that's why the scramble starts to happen. Well, I think one of the things is, and I don't want to claim too much credit here, but I'd been working with American sports previous to that. I was the England football team agent during the late 80s, and I'd had the privilege of working with people like Diego Maradona, and you could see just the immense pizzazz that man had. And I mean, in Naples, which is a very religious city, there are big pictures, posters of Jesus hanging off of buildings, and next to them, equally big posters of Diego. It was at that level, it's ridiculous. But you could see there was just something, he'd given Italian football that shot in the arm that people thought, it was a big deal, that Barcelona to Napoli deal. And you could see what it was doing to Italian football. And recently, the A-League in Australia had brought in Del Piero. And it had, for those 2 seasons he was there, the ratings had gone from here to here without much promotion. So for me, it was all about the X factor, the star factor, the pizzazz factor, all of that. And English football was very much a quality product to watch, technically deficient against Spanish, Italian, French football, but an interesting and fascinating product to actually observe because it was such high energy. So people like me started saying, well, look, if we could, because of Sky, because of Rupert Murdoch, we've got the money now to go and buy the best talent. And if we could, I was asked by Sky to design, because I've been the guy bringing in the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball, the NHL, and just making it fun. And I was the England football team agent, and we'd made following England fun. You know, I'd opened it up to all the media, and I said, all you're going to get from me, you'll get free access now, we're not going to charge for anything, but you're going to get a lot of sponsored pictures, and they're going to be fun pictures, they're going to be lifestyle pictures. And when we brought in people like Coca-Cola, and instead of having, you know, a shot with the England players going, or whatever, you know, we'd have Peter Shilton, and then England goalkeeper jumping out of a swimming pool wearing a Coca-Cola shirt. So it was lifestyle. And all of that played well for Rupert Murdoch and the beginning first few footsteps of the Premier League, and coming up with titles like It's a Whole New Ball Game, and just making it all fun and good music. And at that time, football had we used to have 3 or 4 cameras at a game. Sky went in at 17 cameras. I mean, we're now up to about 37, 38 and some, but the 17 cameras was a whole revelation. You could actually see what was going on the bench, for instance. You never used to get pictures of the bench. You could pictures of everything, anything that happened. If I came and tackled you from behind, you could see in slow-mo the boots, the studs, the angle of the studs. It was a whole new ball game. So I think we turned soccer from just football into entertainment, and we did a couple of, I think, really clever things. We managed to convince Richard Park, who was then programme director of Capital Radio, which was the big London radio station, probably the most powerful radio station other than the Nationals, which was the BBC at the time, to take football off of AM radio to FM radio. So now we were entertainment, and we got this whole new audience, and they were called women. And so we were growing, and we used to say to the clubs, you know, this is fun now, this is family fun now. Take down the family enclosures. Because that, for me, used to say, there's the family enclosure, you can take your family, it's safe, it's nice, you can get a hot cup of tea as opposed to a cold cup of tea, the rest of it's crap. You know, you have to be careful over there. And you're right, there were a lot of bad things went on in English football. People died. I mean, it doesn't get any worse than that. People died in stadia, just for going to watch a football game. So, for me, the 1990 World Cup was the catalyst. England did well. The nation felt warm towards Paul Gascoigne and the England team. We'd had fun. The Italian World Cup adventure for us had been an enormous, emotional release for the English football fan. And suddenly we had a team to be proud of. We had fun people around it. I'd insidiously worked the newspapers, and so we had fun headlines, punchy pictures. And then we followed it with the Premier League. And it was just a real, it was, you know, life's all about timing. You know, would America ever have landed on the moon if there wasn't a Cold War in 1969? Probably not. So it's all about the jigsaw pieces have to fit, and they all fitted at that moment in time. And then people like myself were involved with Sky, and we did some really silly stuff. You know, we had dancing girls and fireworks and stuff, and everyone was, oh, what's all that? But it was, again, it was part of the fun picture, and we started dropping that stuff later, because the football was speaking for itself, because we were bringing in the talent that people like me wanted to see. You know, when I was a kid, if I wanted to see, I love Brazilian football, obviously, but if I wanted to see Garrincha or Zico or Socrates, I occasionally saw them on television, but to see them here, I'd have to wait maybe for Brazil to turn up once every 4 years at Wembley. So now we were looking to bring in the stars live so people could see them. And that's really why it became successful. Actually, I'd like to claim immense responsibility for it, but all I did really was take what American sport was doing and import it and anglicize it. So I used to go, I'd sold out of my record business, my music business, and I was living in Los Angeles at the time, and I used to go and watch the LA Raiders. You know, the guys with the pirate patch, and it was the antitheses of entertainment, that they were supposed to be the bad guys. They were like the happiest, fun, bad guys I've ever met. But it was entertainment. And I thought, God, if you could take our soccer, is so much, I mean, I love American football as it happens, but for me, soccer was, you know, for me, it was just extra special. So if we could take our game and make it this wonderful entertainment so that the fans feel they're coming to be entertained, and you can bring your wife, your girlfriend, your children and feel safe and excited about a game, then I think that would be remarkable. So all I did really was actually bottle that and bring it back here. And I was very fortunate to have the England football team because they were the iconic client, if you like. And the FA weren't very helpful to me to begin with. They had one sponsor, which was a sportswear company called Umbro. And Umbro had paid money, and they had everything, absolutely everything. Everything that moved had to be Umbro. And there was me coming in with Coca-Cola and Mars and Treeball mints and budget rent-a-car and all those sort of things. And trying to find space in this environment where Umbro had here to here, and I had maybe, you know, that's probably an exaggeration. So we did silly things, you know, we got Coca-Cola to advertise around the ground, and I'd tell the team, not on a big game, this was only on friendlies, where the boards were, and, you know, I said, you know, can you celebrate by a board, please? And so you'd see some old footage there in the late 80s of the team scoring and going, hey! And they're all looking where the Coca-Cola board is, and sometimes it'd be 50 yards away. And they'd all run off down the field, and then they'd hug each other and kiss each other. And Coca-Cola said, well, this is great, that's really good, but the problem is that they're now standing by the board, but nobody can see it's us, other than the red thing, because they're standing in front of the Coca-Cola sign. I went, okay. So we spoke to a couple of the lads and said, okay, when you get close to the board, can you dive on the... And we had to put, you know, grass, you know, because at Wembley it was all cinder tracks, so they would have cut themselves. So we had to get Wembley to put grass on the thing, and they dived in front of the board, and that was the start of people diving on the pitch, and all the team dived on top of them, and then all we had was Coca-Cola. As a human being, I loved him. I thought he was charming. He had that ability in a room full of people to look at you, and you thought you were the only person in the world he was talking to. And he had big eyes and a warm personality and just a pizzazz. You know, he was only about 5'2". That's English measurement, sorry. And he'd walk in a room of 100 people and people would go, even if they didn't know who he was. He just had, and when he was born, I think maybe God was in a good mood and have a bit of special dust, Diego. And he did, he had it. He had special dust all over him. It was just wonderful. And we had some silly times. He had, because of the emotional support that he got from the public in Naples, he had special dispensation to drive through red traffic lights in Naples, which was like crazy. Just he had a collection of Ferraris, and we used to go out and just and he'd be driving up, you know, fairly quickly to a red light, and he'd go, "It's okay, I can do it." Fabulous. He was a good guy. My only worry for him, and I think ultimately, sadly, it was proved correct, was that there were just too many people around him. There were, and I talk about that in the book. You know, there was just. I used to sit with one of them. There was one really good guy called Nestor Gerasito, and I used to sit with him in the lounge at Diego's house, and we'd sit and have coffee, and there'd be all these people and everything. And I'd say to Nestor, you know, what are they all doing? Why are they all here? You know, what's the point? Obviously, Diego enjoyed their company, but it was the first time I'd really seen close on, you know, real idolatry. And obviously the hand of God worked against my nation, but it really was, the hand of God had touched him. He was just a magnificent human being. The most difficult one was actually something that, it's a few years ago now, and it came while the European Union was growing, and we had a lovely player coming in from Serbia, who at that point weren't in the European Union, and we tried every which way to get him in, and the PA just didn't tick all the boxes. He didn't have enough caps to qualify to be treated as an exception. His country weren't in the European Union. He hadn't quite played enough games at senior level. Everything was wrong, but I only only by that much. And I remember we sat down, and I promise you this is God's own truth. We sat down in my office over days with him and we talked about how we're going to do this. And then one day he came in for lunch and I said to him over lunch, you know, you're just going to have to get married, that's all, you know. You just have to marry a nice English girl, you know. I'm joking. Anyway, we wandered back to the office. I was working at Wembley at the time. We wandered back to the office and that afternoon he sat around in my office, and at one point in the afternoon, one of the promotion girls for one of the sponsors that we had walked in, and you could see he's looking at this. He said, "That's the girl I'm going to marry." And I'm going, you know, be careful here. Hang on, we can't be a marriage bureau. We're not licensed to do that. He said, "No, she's gorgeous." And he went and we spent 10 minutes chatting to him. And he got a phone number, and he phones me about 4 days later, and he says, "Oh, thank you so much. And we're getting married." I went, "Oh, get out of here." He said, "No, we're getting married." I went, "Oh, I'm really delighted. I have to say, when are you getting married?" He said, "Tomorrow." You're invited. So we all went to Marylebone Registry Office, and I phoned they're in the Championship now, this club. I'm beginning to give the story away here. And it was an big English Premier League club, and the chairman said, "God, you've earned your commission this time." Let me just, before I answer that, let me just go back in a second, and because I think that justifies some of the argument of why the agents earn so much money. And again, we look at Raiola, who's been with his clients. They're long-term clients, and he does a very good job looking after them, all of them, and their lifestyles. I mean, I had a company where we had 400 players. I had, I think, 30 or 40 man managers. Because the one thing football does badly in this country, and it's marginally getting better because they have things like player liaison officers now at football clubs, but the one thing we've done badly traditionally is that we've imported young talent of, say, 18, 19, 20 years of age. You're still young. And you're speaking a different language, coming to a different culture. And they say, "Hey, you're very welcome. Here's your check," and then everything else. And you want to buy that house? Okay, well, this guy will help you buy that house. We'll see you for training tomorrow morning. And they kind of leave them be. And so the agent has to be a really good guy or girl to be able to manage that mindset of the player who is on his own, sometimes without his family for a while, manage the family, which may be 3,000 miles away, in some cases longer. And we've had loads of silly requests, and I'm trying to think of anything really stupid, but there was one that didn't happen actually. There was a player coming across from Germany, and the deal had gone on for about 6 months, and it was a hard deal as well. We drove a really hard bargain. Eventually, we got it through. And we phoned him the morning of the time when he was travelling, and he said, "Okay, I'm gonna catch." It was in Hamburg. "I'm gonna catch the ferry." And we go, because I don't know why. Normally we would arrange the flight and everything else. And these days we do private jets, And the player said, "No, I want to travel. I'm going on the boat because I'm going to bring my dog with me." And we went, "Can't really do that." "Well, you can, but he'll go into quarantine." "Why?" "Well, because he's coming from overseas." Anyway, but you can see him every day, but for 6 months he's in quarantine. "Oh, if he's not with me, then I'm not coming." And we're like, "Oh, God. How do we get him in?" And we tried everything. We spoke to everyone from the RSPCA to everyone. Can we get this dog to come in? Can we do local quarantine? Can we put him in a kennel in his garden so he doesn't come out of there and is monitored? But we couldn't do it. So 6 months of work. The player said, "I'm not coming. That's it. I'm staying." And the agents got a big round number. So I think he's been a great investor in British sport. I think he's brought a focused mindset. He's in some ways even overdriven for immediate success, as you can see by the turnover of managers. I have no criticism of Roman Abramovich. I think, I know some people say, you know, why are we letting oligarchs buy out, but, you know, half of the West End of London's owned by rich people from outside England. I'm delighted that Roman came to Chelsea. I think he's brought a pizzazz, he's brought a very professional management team around him, he's brought investment into the game. He's secured Chelsea as an iconic brand. I mean, it was always an iconic brand, but he's certainly secured that club for its future. And I even quite like the fact that nobody really knows who he is and what he is about, because he's assiduously avoided the media. And I think that, and actually what's happened from Abramovich, he was probably, and I've not really thought about this before, but as I'm talking to you, it's an interesting thought, that he's actually one of the very first people to drive interest in ownership. So now if you're a football fan, obviously you're interested in your players, and you're interested in certain aspects of your club and the ground development and all the things that go around the supporters clubs, but now you're interested in the ownership as well. So they're nearly as important to you as your players. So, and I think he was probably the entry point for that thought. We were, I think we were taking Harry Redknapp in there, and we were about £50,000 apart on our commission. After a really long time, hard work, Daniel said, okay, all right, but I want you to get a box at White Hart Lane, because I think it's important that you're here, your client is the manager, you should have a box. And I said, okay. My brother said, February, because we're Arsenal supporters, he said, does it have to face the pitch? So it was done with good humour, and Daniel said, yes, it has to face the pitch, and yes, you have to pay. Okay, so we automatically thought we were going to get a special price, so we didn't really argue it too much. And about 2 days later, as the paperwork's being done, the paperwork, we're spilling it all over, and we're looking at it, and a box, fine, £48,000. So, okay, my 50,000 that I got is actually 2. And you know what? I did what you've just done. I'm laughing because, he did it with charm, and we all made a lot of money out of it. So, sometimes you've got to leave a little bit for the other side. I'm a huge supporter of Arsene Wenger. I mean, from the moment he came in, that club took on a different air. It took on, at the same time I was working with Ruud Gullit, because we brought Ruud in to Chelsea at the time as a player before he became a manager. And there was a whole regime. I used to talk to Arsene about nutrition and he's a really intelligent guy. I mean, he must have 7, 8 different nationalities in that dressing room at any given time. He speaks to them in their own national tongue. I mean, it's a hugely impressive character that can do that. I've sat and talked to Arsene about life after death, about God, about politics, about religion. It always comes back to football, because he's a huge football fan. Look, for Manchester United, they didn't just lose the pilot, they lost the navigator at the same time. And I think that was a double whammy. They lost David Gill as well as Sir Alex Ferguson. And I think that's a very difficult, it's very difficult to do that. I mean, it's a bit like in Arsenal's case, losing Arsene Wenger and Ivan Gazidis. I mean, I know Ivan's very quiet, he sits at the back, but he's a great CEO. And you lose the financial management, and David was so much more than financial management, and you lose the driver of the club. And it's, the vehicle wavers a bit by natural forces. Ferguson, for me, was uniquely special. I mean, he was just so focused. Didn't make everything right, wasn't the best tactician in the world particularly, but he knew how to he'd look at you. And I talk about one particular story with Alex Ferguson in the book, when we transferred Gary Pallister all those years ago. And I remember him saying to me, he's big, he's got quick feet for a big lad, he's got a good head, he said, I'm going to fatten him up, I'm going to give him a chest the size of a barbell, and some. And then I'm going to make him strong, and I'm going to make him dominant, and and Pallister was a mainstay for them for years. He also said, I can't believe I'm paying 2.3 million for a centre-back. Unbelievable, unbelievable. Then he paid 29 million, was it for Ferdinand? Anyway, that's another story. But he was just such a unique individual that he had the ability to wrap himself around the player, love him and bully him all in the same breath. And that's just so unique. And Arsene does it in his own way. Arsene does it with charm, and Alex in a way. I mean, he's also very strong, by the way. Alex does it with a steely determination. And will there ever be another Alex Ferguson? Not like that. I mean, he's unique. There'll be an evolution that will produce another successful manager. Possibly never as successful as that, because again, the game has moved on. He was an absolute British treasure, Alex Ferguson.